once again, the one and only Killer Dan. So, right, I figured this could be another horror related video, of course, because, well, there's a huge misconception that the horror genre itself is a void of creativity, which is a lie because the genre itself does have a lot to offer when done properly, of course. Many people out there, especially critics and minds alike, mistakenly think that the horror genre lacks creativity, when in reality, it is rich with innovation and artistic expression. Of course, horror itself, as a general thing here, can often push the boundaries of storytelling, exploring complex themes like fear, morality, and the unknown. It's not the only way, but there's positive ways. In a really inventive narratives, visual effects, of course, and yes, slides go depth, depending on what kind of movie you want to do, of course. This can be in literature, of course, like books, and yes, even video games. Obviously, it's not just restricted to movies themselves. The genre continues to evolve, challenging audiences and inspiring creators in various ways. And yes, its ability to evoke intense emotional thoughts and tackle profound topics can demonstrate just how creativity can actually the horror genre can truly actually be. The horror genre is of course is a prime example of it creativity because there's so many ways you can actually do this. It doesn't necessarily have to be one restrictive manner, of course. There's a bunch of subgenres, then of course subgenres, then subgenres, of course. And yes, I actually can mix things up, of course. You can mix fantasy with horror and whatnot. Filmmakers, writers, and artists use a wide range of techniques such as surreal imagery, atmospheric sound design, and of course, innovative storytelling methods to craft an experience that both can be terrifying and thought provoking, depending on what you're aiming for. Yes, of course, horror itself, as a general thing, often uses as like a mirror to society, addressing social fears, of course, obviously, cultural uh, complexities, of course, anxieties, of course, and more dilemmas in compelling ways. For instance, you can do this kind of a thing how horror could actually explore issues like racism, for example. Those movies like Get Out, for an example, of course. Okay, this is a more recent example. And then, along with, of course, Sinners, of course, explored racial tensions, of course. I mean, it's not limited to that, of course. You can have this type of character without being about race, because you have Blade, which, of course, became extremely popular. Of course, it inspired two more films. I mean, technically four, but still. Anyway, of course, there's other way you can do this. Obviously, it's not just limited to one way. There's examples like The Shining, of course, and then another profound example, of course, is the original Psycho, of course. Because basically, what I'm trying to tell you, there's more than one way to explore the genre, of course, is what I'm trying to get at. It doesn't have to be one specific kind of way, obviously. So, yes, of course, it can go into issues like that, like social issues, while others go into some kind of psychological trauma or some kind of dread. Moreover, the genre consistently evolves with new subgenres, of course, like supernatural horror, body horror, psychological horror, each individual one pushing creativity boundaries even further. There's independent horror films that often experiments with super low budget techniques, resulting in unique, memorable visuals, of course. And yes, for when it comes to literature, there's of course like Stephen King, for example, obviously. So there's that. Of course, video games like Silent Hill or Resident Evil could be uh, a good way to talk about this kind of stuff. Overall, the horror genre is a vibrant, innovative, and deeply creative field that can continue to surprise people and inspire audiences and creators alike if done correctly, of course. At least I think so, anyway. I do believe when done correctly, can actually be a useful tool to actually help be creative, I guess you can say. So there's that, I reckon. I want to bring up the first Life is Strange. I want to say first one, I mean, in the sense of release, because if we want to talk about chronically speaking, this is technically Life is Strange 2 if you include Life Strange Before the Storm, because that's technically a prequel to this, thus making this one be Life is Strange 2, even though there's already one called Life is Strange 2 already. They came out after this. Yes, there is a Life is Strange 2. They call it Life is Strange 2. It just makes, even though technically that'd be Life is Strange 3, but anyway, whatever. That's not confusing. But anyway, as I was saying, the first one is, yes, can be considered viewed as a coming of age story. This game centers around Max Caulfield, this teenage girl who discovers she has the ability to rewind time. Through this narrative, she has to navigate through complex themes such as friendship, morality, identity, and loss, all all landmarks of coming of age journey. But I do believe, in my honest opinion, yeah, this can be viewed as a supernatural element, but it does contain darker themes that could be explored through a horror story. At least I think so, anyway. Of course, there's characters like Joyce and Chloe, who is the daughter of Joyce, and a whole plethora of other characters that you come across. Chloe was originally killed off in a bathroom, and that's when Max Caulfield discovers she has this time traveling ability and it pretty much even end up saving her, of course. And yes, it sounds pretty crazy, of course. Anyway, so I do believe that the our genre is fully capable of transforming stories by embracing the atmosphere, and you can use this as a way to get into the psychological depth of this and fear of the unknown. Especially when you're a teenager, you're not going to know how your life is going to play out, especially considering the fact there's a lot of pressure on your shoulders once you finish high school, obviously. Yes, of course, Chloe and Max will go to a wealthy enough. It may not be like super high up there, but a wealthy enough school, and that you could actually have your own dorms, of course. And this doesn't mean you can't go to your actual house, obviously, but this can be used as an environment where you could introduce the important characters. There are other characters whom Max does interact with in the game. Yes, might not be major characters, but characters nonetheless, whom you will interact for quite some time. But as I was saying, yes, parents putting too much stress on a teen like Max to figure out everything on their own for their lives can be extremely stressful, which yes can be turned to a horror thing, which I do think can be a powerful yet relatable concept. So in a way, if I wanted to, I could frame this as a psychological horror story where the stress and pressure from parents, maybe not just Max, but the other characters as well, along with, yes, clearly Max and Chloe in this case, that type of stress that Max would face could be morphed into a horrifying, I guess, obsession force. I do think so. If I want to like primary focus on Max, his whole struggles with her parents' high expectations. I come to think about it, I don't think the game does explore her parents that much. Not really. I don't think so. Come to think about it, but this could be was a way to go into it. Obviously. Then before I can do that, I want to go into, yes, the character Kate will be definitely needed because I do believe that for this story to work out, she has to play an important part of the story. And yes, I do believe that this game does explore very heavy subject matters like depression, suicide, bullying. Even though I do think that it should have dived deeper into some to some extent, but the way it's handled is actually pretty decent actually. And of course, Max being the of course, Life is Strange is one of these games where you can actually have an effect on your choices, depending on what you do, have a negative outcome if not done carefully. And assuming you do save Kate's life, which in my version of the story, you definitely will, yeah, this is going to definitely have an effect on from this point forward. Another thing, speaking of choices, assuming you select all the right choices up until the end, where you actually sacrifice the town and save Chloe's life, everybody except the people in the diner would have lived, except the people who are in the diner would just die, which honestly doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Not really. That's kind of a bit of plot hole right there, game, but whatever. So you can patch that up where everybody lives, including them, of course. But yes, it's going to involve that tragic ending, of course, a crazy ending as well. But more on Kate. The Kate's storyline just could add more stress, of course, implicating Kate's storyline can add a powerful emotional depth and realism to the horror narrative because a lot of people like Kate do suffer for one way or another. So we gotta make this relatable, that is to some extent, I guess. Yes, Kate's struggles with bullying, shame, and her mental health can serve as a foundation for these kinds of horror elements, highlighting how maybe how social trauma can turn something or someone that's innocent into something terrifying when pushed to the limit. So the emotional background, of course, these two characters are good friends. Obviously, they're like really great friends and whatnot. That can still be kept, of course. Kate's experience with bullying, logical horror, of course, her vulnerability and the pressure to conform to hide her pain could be, I guess, amplified in this one, symbolizing how undressed trauma festers and manifests as like some monstrous force and whatever. And Max herself is trying to help her out in some kind of fashion, of course, in some kind of way. Because, as I was saying, she can be a compassionate person and really wants to help her out in some kind of fashion. And that can be definitely be added here because they are really good friends after all. And of course, Max herself could witness her breakdown, which in this horror version could be visualized as a haunting or maybe a ghost manifestation, a manifestation of her own pain and trauma. So maybe PTSD kind of a thing going on, of course. Yes, this could be happening simultaneously with Max, of course. We'll have some, of course, psychological nightmare type of stuff because with her parents, just like just like how Kate has to deal with the experiences she has, of course, Max begins to have these experiences with terrorized visions or voices that could represent her parents' expectations. Each voice be demanding perfection, warning her that she's not good enough, or threatening her with something if she fails, of course. But point being, you can have Kate have more of a, I guess, more screen time of story wise, and Max. These two could be the more prominent characters. Is what I'm trying to say. I mean, Kate is there, but she's not like the primary focus of the story, really. But for my version, Kate will have definitely more screen time story wise. Yes, obviously the character Chloe's drug dealer can still be a part of the story, along with clearly Chloe herself. She's still gonna be a part of the story because she's a major player here. Obviously, the side characters like the janitor character, he can still be a part of it. Yes, this one too. This side character, it's like a bunch of side characters like him as well. These characters can still be a part of it. Yes, even the homeless lady that was in here as well. Yep. Yes, of course, Joyce as well. Just want Max and Kate to be the primary characters in this version. Speaking of who, Kate has a rabbit, so the rabbit can be here and there throughout my version of the story, and so there's that. I find kind of confusing because for one, every practically every character in this game series has a spiritual animal. This includes Kate. So I'm getting the reference is her spiritual animal is supposed to be a white dove specifically because new beginnings, healing, purity, peace, and stuff like that. Love and faithfulness could be a part of this. So I'm not exactly clear on what Kate's animal, spiritual animal, is supposed to be. Is it the rabbit or is it this? But I'm just a little confused by this. That's all. Not exactly clear. And speaking of complaints with this game, is yes, I'm keeping the time traveling thing. Okay, I'm keeping the time travel thing up here. All right, it's just confusing because that character Frank, the drug dealer character, As it turned out, yes, he looks like he may have a thing with another character named Rachel. Yes, I know it's just kind of hard to keep track of all this, but as it turned out, there's something with this character and Rachel. This makes it extremely awkward considering the fact that Rachel actually had a what you call it a LGBT relationship with Chloe. So this puts it at ends here. So eventually, yes, of course, the thing is that yeah, Rachel died. Okay, it is confirmed that she died here, folks. But what's kind of confusing, what's really confusing is that why didn't Max go back in time, which he has done? Max has went back in time enough to actually tell the younger versions about certain things. If Max can go that far back, why didn't Max herself tell Chloe about Rachel? Because there was a point in the story where yes, dude, these two characters, Max and Chloe, did like a whole detective work kind of a thing here, which kind of like kind of reminds me of like a murder kind of a thing here, like one of those murder mysteries kind of. Maybe we'll lean into that too. Maybe we'll lean on that whole murder mystery aspect. Maybe keep on that, sure. And as it turned out, yes, there was like a thing between these two and Frank. Yeah, there was like a whole history of these two characters, at least to some extent. Anyway, it was kind of vague about it, kind of. But yes, Rachel ended up dying, of course, and it just broke Chloe's heart because it came out like these two actually really liked each other, like really like each other. Yes, the right Amber bit does become an important part of the plot, by the way. The revelation that Ranger Amber is dead is a significant and impactful moment in Life is Strange. So, okay, throughout the game, Rachel's appearance, yeah, from the get go, okay, Rachel's disappearance is a major mystery, at least in the beginning of the game, that drives most of the plot and character motivation, especially for Chloe Price. And we can still keep that here, of course. Rachel's death was, of course, confirmed, and it deepens the emotional weight of the story and highlights the themes of loss, of course, grief, and the consequences of past actions, common elements of coming of age narratives. And this could heavily be reflected on the whole stress thing I just mentioned earlier for Max, of course. And we can still keep that a thing, of course. This just adds to the stress, and whole stress could have been awakened or attracted to supernatural forces or maybe identities could feed on her fear. And this doesn't help really. So turning her inner struggles into an external threats. So there also going to be the isolation and paranoia, the feeling of being consistently watched over or judged by some invincible, obsessive force that mirrors her feelings of being overwhelmed and alone, quite obviously. So you can actually, for these visual and atmospheric ideas, you can use maybe some dark, claustrophobic environments, like her room become like a twisted nightmare version of her safe space, shadows lurking and just out of sight. Maybe when they're in the junkyard, of course, like they are right now. But Max can try to keep it cool when she's talking to, of course, uh, Chloe, of course. And yes, these shadows go whispering fears and doubts. Then there's that quite obviously. I'm just telling you what happened with Rachel as an added stress thing, quite clearly. Chloe's more, of course, going to be, I guess, going to be depressed, I guess, in this version as well. The player's awareness of this tragedy adds layers to the whole character development quite clearly. When I'm referring to Gloria quite clearly, and pretty much emphasizing how young people can grapple with trauma and the harsh realities of life. Yes, this whole revelation does underscores the game's exploration of maturity, conflicting, going into confronting difficult truths, accepting an unpredictable and often painful life, nature of life, you should say, and making sense of laws, all kinds of things to appeal to the journey of growing up. Yes, of course, add the horror element to it because, again, the stress. In essence, the Rachel Amber storyline amplifies the game's themes of coming of age through its emotional depth and the character's response to tragedy. But again, like I said, if the character Mac could go back in time, why didn't she go back in time and warn Gloria about this and just prevent all of this? Just attempting to tie everything together, folks. Quite clearly, like I was saying earlier, I want to keep the main aspect of everything, just keep it as it was, but just frame it as a horror story, which just means I'm going to basically just tweak up major bits and pieces here and there. And it's even though, granted, it's going to be an alternate timeline. So yes, the idea is to explore parental pressures when unchecked can suffocate a young individual's mind, the fear of failure, and yes, being unable to escape the burdens of expectations, turn into like a literal monster, ghost hunting Max in this case. The struggle for independence and self identity, which is kind of the idea anyway, as a battle against like some kind of supernatural force, like a metaphor kind of a thing. And yes, I still want that kind of thing still be with Max and still have it be a way to create atmosphere. And yes, it was a bit where Max has to help Gloria get her foot unstuck with the railroad tracks. Yes, that's the thing here. I do want moments where these two can actually bond. I still want that. I like a lot of these moments. He does have like a slice of life feel to it, and I would like to keep that aspect of that in the story. At least to some extent, you can still have the creepy moments and whatnot. But the thing is that you're gonna have to kind of lighten the moment here and there, given the heavy subject matter, as referenced before, quite clearly. You just to line up here and there. It does. I'm not saying to turn this into a comedy or anything whatnot, because personally, I don't like horror comedies. I like my horror movies. I like comedies, but mix them together, I do not do that. I don't like that at all. But it's just I'm just gonna amplify the horror aspect more so. Again, if I do have to criticize the game or anything, and yes, as you can see, yes, obviously the whole photo thing will play in a major part of the story. I'm not taking that away either. I like that. It's just one teacher, Jefferson, the one character who I will show later, by the way. But that's Jefferson character. I will pretty much show that more towards the end of the video because he will play like a major part of the story. But if I'm gonna criticize the game for anything, is that if you play it straight through, it just gives you like the slice of life kind of thing. But then the whole thing where Jefferson does in the dark room, it just feels like right the fuck out of nowhere. It suddenly becomes like a really horrific, horrifying experience, which again I will get to in a bit. It just comes out of left field. The horrendous moment what Jefferson has done came out of like it's terrifying. Like it came out of nowhere. It feels too ham-fisted if you ask me. I like the concept though. I like the fact that these characters are in danger. You could potentially die, and that's kind of the main themes. Of course, assuming if you made the wrong choices, obviously, but you can still be in danger. Even if you made the right choices, you still be in danger anyway, regardless, and that's fine. But that's the thing with horror. With horror movies, horror stories, there's always something to get you. There's always something there to get you that wants to kill you. You can keep that as it. That's always there. Nathan is pretty much has a connection with Mr. Jefferson, and let's not forget about the fact that he and Max can't get along whatsoever. You do have to keep in mind that she witnessed him kill Chloe right in the beginning of the game when she discovers her rewind power. And then Warden over here, Kate's male friend, pretty much stupid to him, and they just fought each other for moments, of course. And plus, throughout the entire game, he's pretty much really friendly towards her. And if you choose to, you can actually have max romance with him if you choose that option, which I didn't do that in game, by the way. But even if you want to apply that here in this situation anyway, let's just say that it was just more of like a dating thing and it was nothing serious. She was going to be just thinking maybe just to try it out. People, some fans, I mean, I should say, of the games, did criticize this character, Warden, I mean, to be a bit of a creep. And she could pretty much tell him to fuck off just because of that, I guess. And yes, obviously the whole backstory between, yes, Rachel and of course Victoria and Chloe, this whole prequel bit, that can still apply here. Anyway, but going back to the whole thing with the Mr. Jefferson bit here, I'm not going to take that away either. I don't mind having the Jefferson storyline. He seems like this nice teacher at first, but he turns out to be a scumbag. Well, but we're going to emphasize that more. Maybe he's too focused on these teenage girls making these weird remarks and whatnot, maybe stalking them, which it kind of was anyway. But you didn't find that out until much later, quite clearly. But however, again, just trying to emphasize on what Jefferson is going to do, just making these weird remarks. Maybe he's getting a bit too handsy. Maybe he got obsessed over their clothing and whatnot. Just throw a bit more hints throughout the story. Is what I'm saying. Be more, I guess, glean the horror stuff, but make it come off more natural. That's what I'm saying. Yes, obviously the character of Mr. Jefferson is portrayed as very creepy and unsettling character in Life is Strange, at least the first one. His demeanor, behavior, and interaction with students like Max and Chloe does give a sense of manipulation and underlying sinister intent. His creepiness is a key factor of the game's tension. There is a sense of manipulation here, folks. But yes, there's a bit of mystery. Initially speaking, he does come off like this charming photo teaching teacher, but yes, gradually revealing darker, more disturbing traits. His obsession with beauty, well, his version of beauty, his inappropriate behavior, the way he would manipulate students for his own purposes, does display this. His presence is really unsettling, of course. But yes, the point here is that the character is supposed to add a sense of trust because he's a teacher, deception, and a hidden agenda beneath the seemingly normal facade of this coming of age story, where the young characters often confront uncomfortable truths and, yes, the adults around them. Maybe there could be some subtle and eerie behavior, have him exhibit small, off-putting habits and whatnot. That can still be a thing, but obviously, and maybe unpredictable mood swings, and yeah. And the thing is, the whole time traveling with Rachel, by the way, going back to the whole Rachel bit, a young Max does confront a young Chloe when Max go back in time into her younger body and they both can talk. The younger version of Max is completely aware of the events that will unfold. So I'm thinking, why didn't Max tell her, Chloe, I mean, tell Chloe about what's going to happen? I, I was thought that's like a major plot hole. Why didn't this happen? I don't know. I want Kate and Max to be the primary thing in this version of the story. The game's themes of bystander empathy and social judgment can be turned into like a supernatural negative thing that feeds off a collective indifference, like how she becomes super depressed and people out there are just indifferent about it, and that could be a form into a monster kind of a thing. The townsfolk's silence and judgment could be represented as a dark, oppressive force that haunts Max even further, making her feel even trapped and haunted. So that could be still be a thing here. The role of parental and society pressures, the stress from our parents and the community's treatment could be depicted as this some kind of insidious, controlling ghost thing, like a shadow that could loom over Max, and of course. Kate as well, whispering doubts and fears, making her just have this kind of mental anguish quite a bit, quite clearly. And somehow these two could just form a friendship throughout the entire thing quite clearly. It looks like they were friends from the from the very beginning and whatnot. And Maxko trying to do her best to do her justice. I mean, yes, the whole video thing. And yes, Kate was clearly drugged. And yeah, the whole thing, they can play playing into the story. I mean, the whole drug thing kind of plays into stories anyway, because this kind of ties into what the teacher, Mr. Jefferson, anyway, because he would use drugs, and the whole thing with Frank, he used drugs as well. But the thing is that I would probably put more emphasis on that because the game itself never made any clarifications, like who filmed that video and what kind of drugs was Kate having and whatnot. I kind of wish they could have tied that into the game's overall story a bit more, like who filmed it, like who are the bullies who get sent to jail, yeah, because revenge porn, yes, is against the law. So I kind of wish the game could have put more into that in some ways. I know, I'm kind of nitpicking it here. I get it. What I'm saying is kind of besides the point. But yeah, I get that. So, but yes, though the whole bit. Assuming you save Kate, obviously, there's a whole scene where Max does visit Kate at the hospital, which is a nice touch. After she saved Kate from committing suicide, all this can still be there quite clearly. All this can still be there, and she could prevent her from committing suicide. That still could be a thing. Like I said, I can still on this could strengthen their friendship. I can still visit her at her like his hospital bed and whatnot. It can still be a thing. I spent a lot of time with her, and I'm still going to keep all this. Just put a bit more emphasis on this kind of a thing, and I think that would be definitely a good way to show compassion. And for what I want to make work here is that it's quite difficult, really, because again, this goes into some of the writing of the story that I've been criticizing when it comes to the game. While it is a fun game, I do like it. It's just some of the writing is just kind of bad because there isn't any specific information regarding the fact if Chloe, I mean Max, I should say, took any photos when she moved to Seattle. There is no scene discussing this. I'm guessing she did. She likes to take photos, given how she is. But nowhere in the game illustrates this at all. So this puts me in a bit of a predicament, a bit of a thing here. So yeah, there wasn't scene or mention of her taking place of her when she moved to Seattle. But I was thinking she can go back in time. Maybe with some photo or her taking a video with maybe future Chloe, which will be her plus Chloe, specifying the type of food that Rachel would like. And something that only Chloe would know. Chloe and Rachel say. Because in the prequel, in Life is Strange Before the Storm, the two characters really get to know each other, Rachel and Chloe. So, again, I can use this to my advantage somewhere with the information I am given. Again, I do have some issues with the writing here with both of these games. I mean, I can say that for practically every installment of this game series, but with these two in particular, it's like what are some of the rules when it comes to time traveling? They're rather vague. But okay, we use video recordings. Let's use video recordings of a specific event. Like let's say, I mean, it's gonna have to be specific to the thing in the mission anyway. So we can use that to our advantage. Let's say it has something to do with the play. Like, I'm gonna get to Victoria, but I'll get back to her in a bit as well. And it has to be something that Rachel and Chloe they would know. This is a very key component only they would know. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that Rachel's parents, her mom and papa, were there, even though they technically weren't. But again, let's just say they were. And I'm not exactly sure when into the 2000s this take place, but let's say that everybody has a phone that could take video. Let's just say that. So her parents, and a lot of other people are taking video. So which is given to Max. Well, Chloe. When I say that, I mean the present Max will have this footage because the present Chloe we will have it and give it to her. And of course, there's going to be a little argument here and there because of the fact that they spend quite a bit of time apart. Because yes, there was a moment where these two characters just didn't like the fact they would spend some time apart. So in the past, she's given it to all that specific footage from Rachel's parents, just so the present Chloe can give it to the present Max. So so okay, so she does the whole tram traveling thing, of course, and then now as a result, that footage of the play, the past Max would have it. Yes, that very play that would be actually going on in that moment, of course, that play, folks, as it happens, be given to her past self, so past Chloe can actually look at it to convince her about the whole Rachel thing, and of course, and the fact she can time travel. Of course, she's trying to convince her to time travel, which does happen in the game, by the way. But the thing is that, of course, you need some convincing, some hard evidence. This taking us in a very specific time. But eventually, yes, Chloe will see that footage as it happened. So,
What the fuck?
yes, of course, this would be heavily altering the timeline. Because, for one, yes, obviously, Max will have to make this happen in order to make sure to prevent Rachel's death. But at the same time, yes, her reaction, Chloe's, I mean, would now be a part of this thing because in the video because of what Max had done. Not only that, to make this even more confusing, is that if Rachel's death is the whole reason as to why she went back to the past to warn Chloe about this entire thing, wouldn't that mean she's just erased the very reason as to why she went back in time to begin with? Which, yes, translates to the fact that, yes, Max herself would have always had that footage for that very reason. But then again, since she had prevented Rachel's death, shouldn't this mean that Rachel's uh, death would have been erased entirely? Then in that case, wouldn't that also mean that footage would also not exist either? Because that's the very reason as to why she did this in the first place. So this means that the moment that they're in right now here in the junkyard means it would have never happened because Rachel's presence is there because her presence has not been erased in that case. But this timeline would, I guess, I suppose. But then, okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. That's all. So this will also mean that the footage itself also would not exist, but then it would have. But does this mean that this would have created like some kind of feedback loop because of that? So, okay.
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
This whole time traveling business just makes everything so confusing when you think about it. But anyway, of course, all this time traveling will cause Max to have a massive nosebleed, which is a thing in the game, by the way. So yeah, it's going to be causing major injury if I'm pronouncing the word right. Any of you remember in the Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher, like when he does the whole back in time thing, he just goes back to the his present time where everything changed. His nose was bleeding, and he was having those seizures and whatnot. Yeah, that would pretty much have it here, but except much worse because she has done something really major. So from this point forward, yes, of course, Rachel would have been saved, quite obviously. I mean, the three young women, I should say, are now in this junkyard. I don't know who would come up with the idea to hang out here, but it doesn't really matter who came up with the idea. But I can leave it up to you folks. It doesn't matter. But I think it was Chloe's idea, I believe. So we just leave it at that. It was her idea to hang out here, but because of what Max did, she was just fall to the floor and started having a seizure, nose bleeding and whatnot. So the other two women, Rachel and Chloe, was just like, oh no, to be all shocked, like, what's going on here? And she was trying to explain what had happened, but of course, Rachel herself would be like thinking, like, what are you talking about? I was always here. And of course, Max would be all confused and whatnot, like, I prevented your death and whatnot. So, of course, Max can't remember a time where she did exist because what happened previously. But since she had altered the timeline, now, now she has always been there. But Max and Chloe will look at each other, and then Max will look at Rachel, but Rachel and Chloe was confused and everything because like she's always been there. So this whole confrontation where with the drug dealer thing, it would have never happened. So this thing would never had occurred whatsoever. So there'd be some major differences. So this would not happen whatsoever. So okay, since Frank is this drug dealer guy, I guess he has some strong narcotics. I guess some really strong stuff. I suppose. So Max would have warned the both of them about what's about to happen, and they just don't just avoid this part of this whole thing with the junkyard. They would just not meet up with him at all, since I guess he kind of lives around this place. At least that's how I took it anyway. The character, the one teacher I mentioned right earlier, Jefferson. Yes, as it turned out, he got some drugs from him, from Frank, the Frank guy, and which so as a warning, Max herself just trying to convince them to not go to this guy whatsoever. He's a dangerous guy anyway, and because considering what happened in the past, of course, which of course would have been heavily altered because of what Max had done, quite honestly. So this means this altercation right here, like I said, this right here, it would have never happened. It would never occurred whatsoever because of this, because of her interference. So this whole history with Frank and Rachel, again, it would have never happened either. I mean, granted, she will have some memory issues because of what happened, of the whole time traveling of these brand events keeps changing too much. This would have fit nicely into the present version of Max on all the other characters because, for one, the characters of Chloe and Rachel would have just got annoyed with Max because it's like, holy shit, this would have been like the fifth, maybe sixth time we have taken your bony ass to the infirmary. Come on. I mean, it could be some tension because of that. I mean, just going to the whole thing with the stress thing. Like I said, the whole stress thing I was saying earlier. Like we're saying, we have like a little literal ghost, or maybe a force following Max and of course Kate as well. These two characters could be haunted by the stress for different reasons, of course. And that was kind of what was going on anyway. Quite obviously, that was kind of what was going on to begin with. So again, I don't want to change too much of what was already present, but just enough to turn this into like a horror story, but with time traveling. So yes, obviously that's a bit of a weird concept, which okay, I can agree it's a bit of a weird thing to think about, but whatever. I like things that are weird anyway, so I just thought that'd be a good idea just to explore that a bit more here. Major change will be that, of course, there's quite a obvious thing where there's like the LGBT plus thing going on here between Max and of course Chloe. Yes, there's one bit if you actually choose to do that anyway, where Max is dared to kiss Chloe in the bedroom. So yeah, so that would have probably still played out, but most likely not because Rachel is in the picture now. But Rachel would be dating Chloe right here, folks. So this obviously is not going to actually occur, I guess. But even if I'm going to play out that Max does have feelings for, let's say, Chloe in a romantic sense, but she's already taken. So again, this was just add to that stress thing I just mentioned a moment ago. So the whole bit where Chloe tells Max to kiss her would not happen, like at all. So unfortunately for Max, let's just say in this version, she'll still have feelings for her. So this would, of course, create some tension. I mean, before you say anything, yes, you could always argue that part where, let's say that Max could consider maybe like a three-way relationship. But that's not going to really fix anything because what if Rachel isn't really into that? She doesn't want to share anyone. But Chloe doesn't mind having a three-way, so this could create tension between the two of them. Okay. What I'm trying to get at here is that I'm again complaining about the writing here. The writing is kind of it's kind of ass in a lot of ways. Again, with I'm just talking about the. All right, folks. I'm gonna have to just cut this in two parts because this, as you can tell, is getting rather long, and I still have quite a bit to talk about, and I still mean quite a bit. So stay tuned. I will have the second part up as soon as I can. See you.